Modern Queen Tales presents The Overhaul. The grainy security footage playing on my cracked smartphone screen captured the exact moment my life shattered. A digital clock in the corner of the video file stamped the time in harsh white numbers. 11:42 p.m. I watched the replay weeks later, the memory burning a hole in my stomach. The camera, mounted directly above the industrial espresso machine, offered a bird's-eye view of my humiliation. My reflection in the dark glass of the storefront window showed a woman running entirely on fumes. I stood behind the cold marble counter of the downtown Seattle Class Cafe franchise. I wore a stiff polyester apron stained with 3 different types of milk, sticky caramel syrup, and dark espresso grounds. My lumbar spine throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache from 14 consecutive hours of standing on hard concrete. The store manager, Lewis Coleman, stood opposite me. Lewis possessed the slick, over-caffeinated energy of a man who equated cruelty with leadership. He wore a crisp, charcoal grey, tailored suit that cost more than my monthly rent. A heavy gold Rolex watch gleamed on his left wrist. He slammed his palm against the counter. The ceramic tip jar rattled, the few coins inside clinking against the sides. He held my printed bank statement in his right hand. I dropped the folded paper near the register hours earlier when trying to calculate if I could afford to turn on my apartment's heating unit that month. "Look at this," Lewis sneered. His voice echoed off the white subway tile walls, loud and piercing in the empty cafe. $14.32. "This is pathetic, Jacqueline." "That fell out of my bag," I said, reaching across the counter for the paper. "Give it back." Lewis snatched the paper away. He waved it above his head, like a flag of my defeat. "You asked for overtime. You begged for this double shift. You told me you were dedicated to the Class Cafe family. But this," he flicked the bank statement with his index finger, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "This shows a fundamental lack of personal responsibility. Poverty is a personality trait, Jacqueline. It shows laziness. It reveals a chaotic mind. I cannot have a chaotic mind managing my inventory. I work 60 hours a week," I stated. My voice sounded tight, stretched to the breaking point. "The regional rent index just spiked 40%. A gallon of milk costs $9. I am working as hard as I can." "Excuses," Lewis barked. He crumpled the bank statement into a tight ball. He dropped the paper into the wet sink, filled with dirty, steaming pitchers. "You are a liability. Your financial desperation makes you a theft risk. Turn in your apron. You are terminated, effective, immediately." The words hit my chest, like physical weights. The 2026 economy offered 0 safety nets. Hyperinflation had turned basic survival into a luxury commodity. The tech conglomerates owned the housing blocks, the grocery chains, and the utility grids. Getting fired meant immediate eviction. Eviction meant the streets. "Lewis, my rent is due in 3 days," I said. I gripped the edge of the marble counter, my knuckles turning white. "Then you should have developed a better personality," he replied. He turned his back to me and walked toward the office door. "Get out before I call building security to escort you off the premises." I untied the knot at the back of my neck. I folded the stained apron into a neat square, placed it beside the register, and walked out into the freezing November rain. The walk back to my micro-apartment took 45 minutes. The icy downpour soaked through my worn canvas sneakers completely by the second block. The wind whipped off the Puget Sound, biting through my thin denim jacket. I climbed the 4 flights of stairs to my unit, the hallway, smelling of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. I sat on my bare mattress that night. I wrapped a single scratchy wool blanket around my shoulders. I stared at the flashing red light of my empty refrigerator. The compressor hummed a low, mocking tune. I had $14.32 to my name. I had 3 days to find $2,000. I needed a miracle. I decided to create one instead. For 2 years, between grueling barista shifts and during my mandated 30-minute lunch breaks, I coded. I sat in the cramped break room, ignoring the smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, typing furiously on a refurbished laptop, missing 3 keys. I built a highly complex, predictive logistics algorithm. I designed the software to optimize supply chain waste for localized retail. I called the architecture Pristine Flow. The system used real-time weather data, local event schedules, and historical purchasing trends to predict exact inventory needs, down to the hour. The morning after Lewis fired me, I walked to the local public library. I claimed a desktop computer in the back corner. I blasted emails to the acquisitions departments of the top 10 tech conglomerates in Silicon Valley. I bypassed the standard submission portals. I used my coding background to scrape the direct email addresses of the senior vice presidents of acquisitions. I attached a localized demo of Pristine Flow. I used publicly available Class Cafe logistics data to fuel the simulation. I demonstrated exactly how my algorithm could save their massive retail divisions 22% in quarterly perishable waste. I highlighted the massive profit margins they currently bled out through inefficient ordering. 3 days later, my phone vibrated on the cheap laminate table of my apartment. The caller ID displayed a San Jose area code. A senior representative from Oakmont Global Corporation spoke to me for 20 minutes. 5 days later, I boarded a first-class flight to San Francisco on a ticket they purchased. 7 days later, I sat in a glass-walled boardroom on the 40th floor of the Oakmont Tower, overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. I stood at the head of a massive mahogany table. I demonstrated the live code to a room of 12 executives. I ran simulations using their proprietary data, showing them the exact millions they wasted every month. The lead acquisitions director, a woman with sharp green eyes and a sharper white blazer, leaned forward. She rested her elbows on the polished wood. "This algorithm is flawless, Miss Bolton. The integration period looks incredibly brief. We want exclusive ownership." The number they offered stopped my breath. The document she slid across the table contained an 8-figure sum. The wire transfer cleared the following Tuesday. I sat in the lobby of the First National Bank in downtown Seattle. I rested my phone on my lap and watched my banking application refresh. The screen changed from $14.32 to $18,500,000 and $14.32. The glowing green numbers formed a digital shield against the terror of the past week. Most people in my position would buy a mansion in the hills. Many would buy a private island in the Caribbean and disappear. I bought the Class Cafe Pacific Northwest regional franchise rights. I hired Benson & Donovan, a specialized corporate acquisitions firm located in a high-rise downtown. I sat in a leather armchair in their penthouse suite and gave explicit instructions to my lead attorney, Abraham. I directed them to approach Class Cafe's national headquarters with a quiet, highly aggressive buyout offer for the entire tri-state district. Corporate headquarters cared about one single metric: liquidity. The regional district, managed by Lewis Coleman, showed a steady 3-year decline in employee retention. Customer complaints regarding service speed and store cleanliness had spiked 40% in the last quarter. Corporate viewed the Pacific Northwest District as a toxic asset. They viewed Lewis Coleman as a liability they had not yet found the time to sever. I viewed the entire operation as a target. Abraham handled the complex negotiations. He leveraged the all-cash nature of the offer to bypass standard franchise waiting periods. Corporate headquarters jumped at the influx of capital. I returned to Abraham's mahogany-paneled office for the final signing. The massive stack of deeds lay on the polished wood surface. The documents transferred absolute ownership of 42 storefronts directly to my newly formed holding company, Bolton Enterprises. The transfer included all real estate, all commercial equipment, and every single employment contract in the district. "They accepted the cash offer without a single revision," Abraham said. He tapped a heavy Mont Blanc pen on the desk. "You are officially the ultimate landlord of the entire district. You own the buildings. You own the espresso machines. You own the corporate structure. Lewis Coleman now reports directly to you." I picked up the pen. The weight of the metal felt cool and solid in my hand. I signed my name on the dotted line of the final page. The ink dried quickly on the heavy cardstock. The signature permanently shifted the power dynamic from discarded, starving employee to sole proprietor and absolute authority. I spent the next 3 days meticulously preparing for my return to the downtown location. I visited a bespoke tailor on Fifth Avenue. I walked into the hushed, velvet-lined showroom. I selected a midnight blue wool silk blend suit. The master tailor pinned the fabric to my frame, ensuring the drape fell perfectly. The resulting garments looked structured, commanding, and expensive. I paired the suit with a crisp white silk blouse and handmade Italian leather loafers. I scheduled a professional blowout at a high-end salon. My hair fell in sleek, polished waves over my shoulders. I wanted my physical presence to reflect the absolute financial and structural authority I now wielded. I wanted Louis to see his complete destruction before I even spoke a word. On a rainy Thursday morning, at exactly 8 a.m., I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the downtown Seattle Class Cafe. The familiar, overwhelming smell of roasted espresso beans, vanilla syrup, and commercial floor sanitizer washed over me. The morning rush hummed with chaotic, frantic energy. Customers lined up out the door, checking their watches and tapping their feet. The baristas sprinted behind the counter, sweat beading on their foreheads. The hiss of the steam wands drowned out the low ambient music playing from the ceiling speakers. Louis Coleman stood near the glass pastry case. He held his familiar metal clipboard. He yelled at Laura, a barista who had worked at this location for 3 years. "You call this a display?" Louis barked. He pointed a thick, manicured finger at a row of almond croissants. "They are asymmetrical. The labels are crooked. Fix them immediately." "You are moving like molasses, Laura. Do you want to join Jacqueline in the unemployment line? Because I can make that happen right now." I stepped forward. My leather loafers clicked loudly and sharply against the polished concrete floor. "Laura is doing an excellent job," I said. My voice sliced cleanly through the ambient noise of the cafe. Louis spun around. His face flushed with immediate anger. His eyes scanned my midnight blue suit, my polished hair, and the sleek leather briefcase in my hand. His brain struggled to process the visual information. He recognized my face, but the context completely defied his understanding of reality. "Jacqueline?" Louis stammered. He lowered the clipboard slightly. "What are you doing here? You are trespassing. Get out before I call the police." I walked directly to the marble counter. I placed my leather briefcase flat on the surface. I clicked the dual brass locks open. The sound echoed in the sudden quiet of the front area. I pulled out a thick manila folder containing the legally binding franchise transfer documents, complete with the embossed corporate headquarters seal. "I am not trespassing, Louis," I stated. I slid the folder across the smooth marble. "I am inspecting my property." Louis stared at the folder. He looked back at me. A tight, condescending smile formed on his thin lips. "Have you lost your mind? Did the poverty finally break your brain? You need psychiatric help. Read the first page," I commanded. Louis opened the folder. His eyes darted across the heavy cardstock. I watched the blood drain rapidly from his face. A sickly pale grey tone replaced the angry flush. His hands began to tremble violently. The metal clipboard slipped from his grip. It clattered loudly onto the concrete floor, the papers scattering everywhere. "Bolton Enterprises," Louis whispered. He read the corporate entity name out loud, his voice shaking. "Sole proprietor, Jacqueline Bolton." "I bought the district, Louis," I said. I leaned closer to him across the counter. "Every espresso machine, every bag of coffee beans, and every single employment contract, including yours." The cafe fell entirely silent. The customers stopped murmuring. The steam wands shut off. Laura dropped a pair of metal pastry tongs on the counter. "This is a joke," Louis choked out. He took a stumbling step backward. "Corporate would never sell a district to a barista. This is forged." Corporate sold the district to a tech millionaire, offering a massive all-cash buyout. I corrected him. "I am the regional owner. I am your direct boss. You are my subordinate. And we are implementing immediate changes to this environment." I turned away from his pale face, to address the stunned staff behind the counter. They stared at me with wide eyes. Effective immediately. The empathy-first corporate policy replaces the previous guidelines, I announced to the room. Base pay for all floor staff is raised to $30 an hour, starting with this current pay period. Full medical, dental, and vision benefits begin on day 1 of employment, retroactively applied to all current staff. Mandatory paid 30-minute breaks occur every 4 hours. A comprehensive profit-sharing structure kicks in at the end of this quarter. Laura covered her mouth with both hands. Tears welled in her dark eyes and spilled over her cheeks. The rest of the staff erupted into massive cheers. The sound bounced off the subway tile walls, bright and full of sudden hope. Customers in the line started clapping. I turned back to Lewis. He looked incredibly small. His shoulders slumped, and he looked terrified. "Lewis, my office," I said. I pointed toward the heavy metal door of the back room. "Now." The manager's office remained exactly as I remembered it. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the small room. Stacks of printed inventory sheets covered the scarred metal desk. A calendar on the wall showed the grueling shift schedules. I walked behind the desk and sat down in the high-backed leather manager's chair. Lewis stood awkwardly near the door. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, clutching his hands together. "Sit," I ordered. He sank into a hard plastic folding chair opposite the desk. The chair creaked under his weight. "We are conducting a formal performance review of your tenure as regional manager," I began. I opened a second, much thicker folder I brought from my briefcase. "I spent the entire day yesterday reviewing the district's human resources logs, exit interviews, and anonymous staff surveys from the past 3 years. Jacqueline, please," Lewis started. His voice cracked in the middle of my name. I followed standard corporate optimization protocols. I had strict quotas to meet. The district directors demanded high margins. "You weaponized financial insecurity to maintain control," I replied. I pulled out a stack of printed testimonies. "I hired an independent firm to reach out to the staff members you terminated over the past 2 years. I have a signed statement here, from Leo. You fired him because he requested 1 single weekend off to study for his university final exams. You told him his engineering degree was worthless compared to coffee service." Lewis swallowed hard, his eyes glued to the scuffed linoleum floor. "I have a statement from Sarah," I continued. I slid the crisp white paper toward him. "A single mother of 2. You deliberately cut her hours to 29 a week, specifically to prevent her from qualifying for the company health insurance tier. You then mocked her in front of the morning shift when she asked for an advance to afford her daughter's asthma medication. The labor margins were extremely tight," Lewis whispered. He wiped a drop of sweat from his forehead. "Your personal bonus structure depended entirely on keeping labor costs below poverty wages," I countered. "You profited directly from their daily suffering. You bought tailored suits and Rolexes with the money you stole from their benefits. That ends today." I pulled out a red felt-tip pen from my jacket pocket. I uncapped it and drew a thick, vicious line through his employment contract details on the top page. "Your corporate Tesla lease is revoked. Hand over the keys," I demanded. Lewis's hands shook uncontrollably as he reached into his suit pocket. He pulled out the sleek black keycard and placed it gently on the metal desk. "Your regional performance bonuses are permanently dissolved," I continued, striking another line through the document. "Your corporate expense account is closed. Your corporate housing stipend for the penthouse apartment is cancelled. You will now experience the exact financial reality you forced upon your staff for years." "You can't do this," Lewis pleaded. He gripped the edge of the metal desk, his knuckles white. "I have a massive mortgage on a second property. I have luxury car payments. I have enormous monthly expenses. I will go bankrupt." "You should develop a better personality," I stated, echoing his exact words back to him with lethal precision. "You need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Lewis. Manage your chaotic mind. Poverty is just a personality trait, remember?" "Are you firing me?" he asked. His voice broke completely. shrinking into a pathetic whine. Firing you gives you the immediate release of severance pay and standard unemployment benefits, I said. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the desk. No. I am demoting you. You are now an entry-level maintenance trainee for this specific location. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a standard-issue Class Café polyester apron. It was stiff, scratchy, and brightly colored. I tossed it across the desk. It landed squarely in his lap. Your new duties include deep cleaning the industrial grease traps under the sinks, scrubbing the baseboards with a toothbrush, and manually detailing the public restrooms every hour, I listed. You will work the closing shift, from 4 p.m. to midnight, 6 days a week. You will clock in and out, using the biometric scanner, by the door. If you are 1 single minute late, your pay is docked according to your own handbook rules. You are permanently banned from operating the espresso machines and the cash registers. Lewis stared at the crumpled apron in his lap. The cheap fabric represented everything he despised in the world. 2 weeks later, I sat at a corner table in the cafe. I drank a perfectly poured cortado from a ceramic mug. I wore a tailored grey wool blazer over a black silk turtleneck. I watched the ecosystem of the store function flawlessly. Laura laughed brightly with a regular customer while ringing up an order on the tablet. The baristas moved with relaxed efficiency. The atmosphere felt light, highly productive, and genuinely healthy. The tension that used to choke the room had vanished completely. The heavy metal door of the back room swung open. Lewis walked out. He carried a heavy yellow mop bucket filled with soapy water and a thick, heavy-duty scrub brush. He wore the polyester apron over a cheap white t-shirt. Dark, foul-smelling stains of industrial cleaner, floor wax, and rancid grease covered his uniform. His posture slumped completely. Deep, bruised circles shadowed the skin under his eyes. His hands looked red and raw from the harsh chemicals. He dragged the heavy bucket toward the front entrance. He dropped heavily to his knees on the hard floor. He began scrubbing furiously at a set of black scuff marks on the concrete near the door. I placed my coffee mug on the table. I stood up and walked slowly over to him. I stopped a few feet away and looked down at his hunched, miserable form. "Lewis," I said softly. He stopped scrubbing. He dropped the brush into the bucket. He looked up at me. His face looked tight, with extreme exhaustion and deep humiliation. "I am offering you a choice today," I stated, my voice calm and even. "Option 1. You stand up, right now. You apologize loudly to every single staff member on this floor for the years of emotional abuse and financial terrorism you inflicted upon them. Then, you resign. You walk out that glass door with absolutely nothing." He gripped the plastic handle of the scrub brush, sitting in the dirty water. "And option 2? You stay," I said. I gestured to the bucket. "You remain on this floor as a maintenance trainee. You earn the strictly controlled, unlivable minimum wage you championed for years. You follow the exact restrictive, punishing employee handbook you personally authored. You experience the grueling physical toll of the labor you exploited for your own gain. You live the actual reality of the 2026 working class." Lewis looked slowly toward the front door. He looked at the heavy rain pouring down on the grey Seattle streets. He thought about his cancelled housing stipend, his revoked Tesla, and his completely empty bank accounts. He had massive debts he could no longer service. He had burned every bridge in the corporate world with his newly publicized HR records. The irony crashed over him in a visible wave. He had spent years meticulously building an inescapable cage of poverty for his employees, and now I had locked him securely inside it. He slowly lowered his head. He reached his raw, red hands into the bucket. He pulled out the scrub brush, water dripping onto his shoes. "I'll finish scrubbing the baseboards," he mumbled. He turned away from me and began scrubbing furiously at a dark stain on the concrete. I watched him work for a long moment. I turned and walked back to my corner table. I picked up my warm coffee mug. The 2026 labor market had mutated into a harsh, unforgiving landscape. Corporate giants routinely crushed the working class under the massive weight of hyperinflation and impossible productivity demands. But inside the walls of Bolton Enterprises, the era of the toxic boss was entirely dead. True accountability had finally arrived, and it carried a scrub brush and a yellow mop bucket. The end. If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.